Welcome to Sit, Stay, Read, the podcast for every wag, whinny, and whisker. I'm Kathleen Donnelly, award-winning author and retired canine handler. Each week, I chat with novelists about the bond we share with our furry friends and how they inspire stories. Grab a coffee, get cozy with your favorite pet. It's time to sit, stay, read. Well, I'm very excited to welcome to the show international best-selling author Keshe Chow. Keshe's book, Strange Familiars, is a contemporary romantasy. It's a fun, forced proximity, enemies to lovers, tropes, all those fun things, but it has some pretty fun four-legged characters as well. Keshe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathleen.
Well, this was a fun, I'm calling it a romantasy. Is that what you consider it, as a
Yeah,
romantasy?
I mean, it's very hard to classify, and I think that's what I
Yeah.
had trouble with when I was querying it and when we are on submission, because I think sometimes people sort of think of romantasy as being, it's that sort of like second world dragons, like the love interest in like armor and swords and sorcery and that sort of thing. Whereas obviously this
Yeah.
is very grounded. It's like in our world, and so I didn't really sort of like know what to call it, but I've been calling it sort of contemporary romantasy or fantasy romance. But obviously, like, there's a big romance element, there's also fantasy, and it's basically just like what I wanted to write. So yeah, so it's very hard to classify.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And tell us a little bit, go ahead and give us the storyline of Strange Familiars and how Gwen and Harrisford meet and a little bit of that history.
Yeah, so basically, Strange Familiars is an academic rivals to lovers, adult, I guess, contemporary romantasy, that is set in a magical veterinary school where they treat witches, familiars, and mythical creatures. And Gwendolynne, who is in the magical familiars stream, which is roughly equivalent to like vets who treat small animals,
Yeah.
is like number one rival to Harrisford Briggs, who is the top student of the mythical creatures stream, which is roughly equivalent to like large animal vets in the real world. And they're both vying for the top spot in their year of the graduating class because they're coming close to the end of their year. But then when things start to go awry, so there starts to be some deadly sort of magical surges that start to affect the animals and the humans in this alternate day London, they have to reluctantly team up to try to figure out the source of the surges because their education is at stake, but also sort of the fate of the magical world. So that's the basic summary.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I thought it was so I live in Colorado where we have Colorado State University and a veterinary teaching hospital, and it's where I
Yes.
take a lot of my animals. So it was fun to kind of read this and get that feel perspective of a vet student, but of course with magical creatures. So that
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. What made you decide to go ahead and go down the fantasy magical road versus like a traditional veterinary hospital?
Well, I mean, I think it's every vet's dream to just kind of be able to treat really fun animals. And I guess, like, so for context, I think we talked about it a little bit before the recording started. So, just for any listeners, I'll fill in everyone that I actually am a veterinarian myself. And so,
Yes.
a lot of these experiences were sort of pulled from my own life, but obviously, like, way more fantastical and way more magical than anything I personally experienced. But I think, like, we treat a whole array of creatures. So when we go through vet school, we see all sorts of wild and wonderful creatures. And when I was sort of like going through my career, I would sometimes see some really interesting things too. I remember when I was a new graduate and my boss saw like a little baby crocodile with conjunctivitis. And I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Gosh.
And one of my friends works at the zoo here in Melbourne in Australia. And so, you always sort of like think, oh, there's just so many like cool animals out there. And obviously,
Yeah.
I read a lot of fantasy. And so, when I read fantasy books and there's animals in there, whether they're just sort of like, talking cats because they're witches familiars or they're like sort of huge, epic, mythical creatures, I'm always like, well, what happens when they get sick or injured? Like, surely someone has to look after them. And so it sort of like started me down the path of thinking, well, this is what the world would look like if we did have magical creatures. There would be vets to look after them. That's just kind of, it's just kind of logical, right? And obviously, I
Yes.
would love to be a vet looking after a magical cat. I'm a cat vet myself. That's sort of like the path of specialization I took. And yeah, I mean, it would make my life heaps easier if they could talk to us. That would be amazing. Um, but yeah, so I think it's just like a fun idea, and so I just took it and I ran with it, and it was like the most fun book I ever wrote because yeah, just like I had so much material of my own to draw from, but then I could just amp it up and make everything way more magical than anything I experienced myself.
I love it. And we were also talking before the show. You live in Melbourne, is that right? Do I
Yeah,
have that?
yeah,
And but the book is set in London, so it made me
yeah.
wonder where you went to vet school. Did you go to vet school in Australia or the UK or
I went to vet school in Australia. So I did my
okay.
undergraduate training here in Melbourne, and then I did my postgraduate specialist training in Sydney. But I actually did spend quite a bit of time in the UK and in London. So it's like this rite of passage for Australian vets to go over to the UK and do what we call
Okay.
locum work there, which is like casual work. And it's because vets basically we really love traveling and obviously like we're way. So it's like a really good base. And London, you know, the UK is very friendly to vets coming over. Like they're really open to Australian vets coming over, and so it's a really common thing for us vets to go over there, and basically,
Cool.
yeah, work for like stints, you know, to do relief work for vets who had gone on holiday, and then you know, earn some money, and often they would provide some accommodation, and then in the off times I would then go traveling around Europe. And so I spent time in London, and I actually tried to get a job at the Royal Veterinary College there because
Oh,
it's
cool.
like an amazing, I mean, it's an amazing building, and it's just such an institution, and it's got such a fantastic reputation. And I sort of, at the time when I was in England, I also was starting to think about going down the path of specialization. So I was applying for sort of like internships and things like that. So yeah, it was always like a dream of mine to work in London, and it never eventuated. But yeah, like writing this sort of book was like basically a manifestation of all my veterinary dreams, treating amazing creatures in London, you know, falling in love with like a hot vet, like, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he is. He is quite the looker, at least in my imagination, and it sounds like in yours too, and in Gwen's imagination. So we meet Gwen. I love the opening chapter because it just shows so much about her, and it just tugs at your heartstrings. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why I could not be a veterinarian. So we meet Percy in the opening chapter where his owner just wants him to be euthanized. Tell us about Percy, and then we'll get into Pudding a little bit, and then the two-legged characters as well.
Mostly actually was inspired by one of my own cats who passed
Oh,
away a few years ago. So I have or had a black cat who I adopted actually in my first year of working as a new graduate at my very first job. And so he was with me, you know, through multiple house moves, interstate moves. You know, when we went to England, like he just, you know, like he just went through life with myself and my partner, who was actually also a vet. So I was just going to
oh,
say that,
cool.
like, me falling in love with a hot vet actually did did pan out.
I love
um,
it. Real story
but
there.
yeah. so so yeah, Percy kind of came organically about because, you know, it had been not long since we lost our other cat, and we still have like a cat that is still with us. But yeah, obviously, you know, you never forget like your pets that move on and that pass
Yeah.
away. And so I just sort of wanted to immortalize him. And you know, if my cat ever talked, I just imagine being like that. You know, he would be very aristocratic and very snarky, but also just have this heart of gold. So Percy was a really personal character for me, and just one that I love. Like, I'm so protective over Percy. If anyone ever has anything negative to say about Percy, I will like be, you know, you can say anything negative about me, any of the other characters, but you know, don't touch Percy.
I don't blame you.
He's a
I
lot
would
harder.
be upset too. I mean, I didn't know
Yes.
Percy like you did, but I would be very because he just came through on the page so real, and now I know why because
Yeah.
he is real.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you've immortalized like he can keep living on through your book. And then there's Pudding. Tell us about
Yes.
Pudding.
Yeah, so Pudding is a really interesting character. And the funny thing is that, like, I never really worked with reptiles. So I worked with people who worked with reptiles. Like I said, in my first job, my boss was an exotics vet. And so I would often see him with reptiles. And so that was really cool. I'd get to see
Yeah.
him sort of like anesthetizing turtles, or like,
Oh,
seeing like little
wow.
baby crocodiles. And he obviously often saw snakes and lizards and things like that as well. So I was kind of like on the periphery watching my boss seeing all these really cool cool animals and critters, but I never really worked with them myself. So putting when I was writing her sort of story, and obviously there's some scenes where she has treatments and things, like I was really out of my depth with that, because we don't learn like a lot about reptiles. We learn a little bit, like we learn about their husbandry and their physiology and things like that in vet school, but like in terms of like the finer details of like treating them, it's very sort of like, you can't be experts at everything basically,
No.
unless you sort of go down that path and do further education. So I actually did end up sort of reaching out to some of my exotics vets friends to get a
Nice.
little bit more advice from them about sort of like treatment of like of reptiles and things like that. And so that was really interesting. And so yeah, and also just like kind of like just some general sort of like, oh, so like what, how do their personalities manifest, like, just to make it more authentic, because again, I haven't really spent a lot of time around reptiles. I don't
Yeah.
I don't own a reptile. I've obviously like know people who own reptiles, but I've never had one myself. So it was harder for me
Yeah.
to write Pudding as a pet as opposed to Percy as a pet, because I've owned cats, and I work with cats and I'm so familiar with cats, but reptiles I'm a little bit more out of my depth. So that was like an interesting thing. So my friend was like giving me all these anecdotes about, bearded dragons who would ride around on their owner's shoulders, and ones that
That's
would
so funny.
go into their owner's pockets and then come out at like little coffee shops and then like go in and like steal like bits of food and things like that. Just such little, they've got such little personalities, and so that was really cool to sort of to pick her brains about all of that. And yeah, and I hope that Pudding comes across as as alive and
Yeah.
as authentic as Percy does.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, yeah, she really did. And it was yeah, I've never been around bearded dragons. I'm like you. I think the only reptiles I've been around was like the snake in our barn that I just asked it to leave. So it was fun to read that. So, oh my gosh. I'm curious about the idea of the world, this magical instability. How did you build that world? And of course, I sort of felt like it's kind of based on what we're going through in real life with climate change
Yes,
and things like that.
yes. Yeah, I guess I think that some people who read the book, especially when I was querying this book and sort of like getting feedback from agents, some of them were like, oh, we wanted this book to really just be this like cozy book where it's just really about the animals, and there's not like all this commentary on like capitalism and like the
Yeah,
magical effects on our world and the environment and things. And I guess like I always set out to write a book where this was grounded in our world. And when I sort of started thinking about it, because I was like, well, if we had magic and I was a vet and or vet student and I was able to use magic in this world to treat animals, like there's zero way that in today's day and age, or even like 10 years ago, whatever, we would have access to magic and it would not be regulated. Like there's just zero
yeah,
way that that would
yeah,
happen. And also there's zero way that in today's day and age we would have access to magic, but there would not be like a corporation or corporations controlling that and
right.
commodifying it. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. Like I think that sometimes I've read books and it's like, well, like magic is all well and good, but there's just no limits to it. Like, you can do anything. And then that sort
Right.
of like makes it that it is like just overpowered. Like you can just do whatever you like with it. And that's fun as well in some contexts. And I've loved reading books like that. But for me, this book was very much about like this has to feel real, it has to feel authentic, and it has to feel like it's a lived-in world that would be feasible. Like you could
Yeah,
drop into this world and feel like it's very much like this could happen. And so it was quite easy, actually. It came about very organically for all that to happen, because I was like, well, this is just like my thought processes were just like, if we had magic, this would happen, and this would happen, and this would happen, and then basically there would be exploitation. There would be sort of, like basically profits over people, profits over animals. Like that just happens realistically in our world, and so like it probably takes away from some of that sort of like light-hearted coziness and everything, but it really is just the story that I felt like I needed to tell.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was perfect. And then I feel like we're leaving out poor Gwen and Harrisford, but talking about all the animals. But I think by bringing them in and their past history, it actually in some ways lightened. I mean, they both have a really intense past history, but it also lightened the book in a way. So what was the inspiration behind those two characters? How did they develop?
I think I just really needed to have two people who offset each other. And I've actually been this weekend working on like a presentation, like because I'm doing a workshop next week
Oh,
about
cool.
romance. And so I've never really been someone as an author, as a writer who, and I think it looks like you're a writer too, based on like
Yes,
what I
yes.
can see behind you. Yeah. And I don't know what your process is like, but my process has really been very much like intuitive, like very sort of organic. So I don't really think about like my process or how I do things. I just kind of like write, and if it feels right, then it's good. If it doesn't feel right, I scrap it and start again. So trying to like think about how I do things has been really hard actually. So when I was creating this workshop presentation, this PowerPoint presentation, and I was kind of like, oh gosh, how do I write a romance arc? Like that's that's really like a hard thing to kind of contextualize and articulate because I
Yeah.
just really did it. And so when people ask me like, how did you create these characters? It's like, oh, that's really hard to answer because I think often when I write a first draft, I don't really know the characters very well. And Gwen's very much like personal, like a lot of elements are pulled from me because, as I said, I pulled a lot of her story from my own story and my own experiences
Yeah.
growing up and going through vet school as like an immigrant, as a daughter of immigrants. I was actually an immigrant myself. And obviously like going through vet school and being like the working class like sort of person. Like so that was sort of a bit easier. Obviously Harrisford is like completely outside my experience again, just like pudding. So I think, and then I think when I was making this workshop, I was kind of like sort of writing out, how do you make an effective sort of like couple arc? And I think often it's like, what do they have to give each other that they don't already have? And so I think
Yeah.
having those elements that, one is like someone who is very sort of like tightly buttoned up and a rule follower versus someone who's never had to follow the rules because he's always had this privilege that has allowed him to sail
Yeah.
through life and get away with things. Like those are sort of like elements that play off each other really nicely as a source of conflict and tension that works well in fiction. Probably wouldn't work so well in real life. Like,
Right.
my husband and I are very similar, and it's like, wouldn't really want to like have all that conflict in real life. But in fiction it works really well because you have this source of like this sort of opposites attract. But I think then fundamentally they both have a very similar moral code where they both like they
Yes.
love animals and they both like want to do the right thing, and they obviously like both want the same thing because they want to both come top of the year, but they also like love fiercely. They're very loyal. They both, to a certain extent, are lonely and feel unloved, and so like reaching out for that connection, and also just have this really unshakable moral code, which I think when the underlying values of a couple are good, like that is when it's sort of just the chemistry
Yeah.
is there. So I think that sort of like came about organically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the chemistry is definitely there on the page. It was fun to read and their banter and especially the goal of graduating top of the class, it was I'm sure
Yeah.
that is an important thing when you're in vet school, depending on the job you want. So,
Yeah, well, actually, like I did play up that rivalry a little bit, because it
okay.
was not really such a thing like in actual vet school, like
Okay.
and I played up a rivalry between the two sort of streams again a little bit. In vet school we sort of had to do everything, like we weren't really separated into streams, which I was always a little bit like, I kind of wish we were separated into streams because I felt very much out of my depth when I was like having to learn about like cattle and like things like that, and
Yeah.
horses, especially horses. I am not like very good at handling horses. And so yeah, but like we were sort of like we had to learn it all, and mostly we sort of were pretty collaborative. There was a little bit of like rivalries and things, but obviously like I played that up for the purposes of the
That
story
makes
to
sense.
provide
That
that
makes sense.
romantic connection. Yeah, and I think like having the rivalry between them, I think that that was especially effective. And again, I'm sort of thinking back to sort of like how I articulated this for the workshop, in that both of them had their personal stakes and their external stakes. So they had their personal
Yeah.
stakes that they wanted to find this connection with this person because they obviously are drawn to each other, and they kind of, they love each other in the end. But then their external stakes, which is basically, if they don't like get this top of the class, if they don't come top of the class, and then they don't get this job at the ministry that they're both vying for, then they both have stuff to lose. So their personal stakes and their external stakes that they're vying for, interior and external stakes, kind of are at odds with each other, both of them individually. And so
Yeah,
that was
that's
like a
true.
really fun thing to play with. It's like, I love this person, or I'm drawn to this person, but then being drawn to this person will kind of ruin everything I've worked for and everything that I've been working towards for
Yeah.
like 6 years. So that was kind of like a really fun dynamic to play with as well.
Oh, it came through. It came through great. I love it. So it brought out the chemistry and the magic on the page. So I really enjoyed that. Now I switching gears a little bit. You said you're a feline veterinarian, but you also
Yes.
have a cat, a ragdoll cat, which I had not heard of that breed. So I had to Google it. And I love, I don't know if it's a him or her, but Wasabi. I love that
Yeah.
name.
Yes,
Tell
it's
us
her.
about
Yes.
Wasabi.
Oh, Wasabi. Oh, she's so funny. She's such a princess, but she had a very interesting origin story because we kind of like we kind like lied. So my husband and I, like I said, both vets, and we kind of ended up like having to lie a little bit to have her. She's a rescue. So she came
Okay.
from a job that my husband did. So he was working at a sort of like a locum job in Sydney when we lived there, and they did the pet store checks. So back then, like pet stores were allowed to sell kittens. Now they are not allowed to do that anymore.
Okay.
They were allowed to sell kittens and puppies, and so she came from there. She was really sick, and they
Oh,
weren't looking after her very well. So we took her home to care for her because no one really wanted to sort of like pay to look after this kitten that had no owner.
oh,
So we nursed her at home for a couple of weeks, and she ended up having cat flu, which is a really common thing. And but when they are babies and they get cat flu, they can be knocked around just like kids, like babies, human babies. Like if they
okay.
get flu,
Okay.
they can obviously be much more susceptible to getting really sick than like a robust adult. And so we nursed her for a few weeks and she came good, but then we were like, we can't give her back. We'd already named her. We give her the name, and that's like the biggest mistake you can make when you're trying to foster an animal. And so we were
Yeah.
like, what are we going to do? We can't give her back, but we couldn't afford the few thousand that they were charging for a purebred ragdoll kitten. So we actually like rang the pet store and we're like, do you know she's got this disease that's called like feline herpes virus, which is like the cat flu virus. And once she has it, she will have it for life because it's like a cold sore virus. Like once the cats get
Makes
it, they
sense.
will have it for life. And we're like, she'll have it forever. So you can't sell her because like you're selling her with this known virus that she's carrying. And they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And we're like, well, we'll buy her from you. We'll pay you what you paid the breeder, and we'll buy her and we'll just adopt her. And because we're both vets,
Yeah,
we can give her a good life for the
I love
rest
it.
of the time that she has, because she's so sick. And they're like, oh yeah, of course, like we're not going to lose any money then. So we paid them a few $100s and we got to keep her. And the thing is that herpes virus is like so common. Like almost every cat has herpes virus. Like it's just like they just have it, like it's like cold sores and people like it. We all carry it pretty much. And it comes out often like when cats are stressed. So she's never really had a problem with it again because she doesn't really get stressed. She just like lives the most like lavish life. She just like lies around on beds all day and like gets patted and like eats food, nice food. And yeah, so she's now like she's 15 now, and so
Is she
she's just
really?
like
Oh my gosh.
she is,
Wow.
yeah. So she we got her when she's the tiniest little kitten. She was so sick. She was like very emaciated and she was really little. But
Oh.
yeah, she's like again, she was went through many house moves with us and interstate moves and everything like that. And yeah, it's just never really got sick again. So like, yeah, yeah, but I feel like that was us using our powers and lying for good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, maybe if she went back to the pet store, she probably would have gotten sick again because it was very stressful there. So yeah, so
Probably.
that's how we.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And what a beautiful breed too. When I looked him up, I thought, wow, that is a beautiful cat. So
Yes, they
I
have the
was,
most wild origin story. I don't know if you read the origin story
oh,
of
I didn't.
Ragdoll, the ragdoll breed. Yes, so they're all like they're all descended from the original ragdoll or the original ancestors called Josephine, I think. And the
Oh,
person
wow.
who owned Josephine was like a woman who was really kind of a bit off her rocker. Like she was very eccentric, and Josephine was such a nice cat that she thought that Josephine was like the perfect cat to breed because she had such a beautiful temperament. She bred Josephine with a bunch of different other breeds that had like pointed color point sort
Okay.
of features, that sort of like that, dark face and dark paws and dark ears and fluffy sort of white coats and things. And then ended up breeding like these ragdoll sort of
Okay.
phenotype, this ragdoll kitten look. And they were all sort of like Josephine with like their temperaments. They were all just like, you pick them up
Yeah.
and they just flop and they were so calm and they were really like easy to handle and everything like that. So then she put out this rumor that like ragdolls couldn't feel pain because they never reacted to anything. And so people sort of thought these cats couldn't feel pain, but it was really bad because people started to do bad things to them. So
Oh,
yeah, then they sort of had to backtrack on all of that. Like, the ragdoll associations had to kind of like dial all that back so people wouldn't treat the cats badly. So yeah, it was a very interesting story. It's a
yeah,
very
that
new
is.
breed, very, very new breed of cat compared
Huh.
to some of the other cat breeds. But yeah, I'm sorry, I could probably like talk cats, you know,
No, I love
marvelous.
it.
You're probably going to run out of time, and I could still be yapping on about cats and animals and things like that. So, like people who are like, "I'll have about animals."
No, I love it. I could talk animals all day, all night as
Yes.
well. So, but yeah, so what's up next for you? I know you have some young adult books, and then this is your first I guess adult book.
Yeah.
What are you working on right now?
So I've got the sequel of Strange Familiars that is supposed to come out next
Oh,
year. So
fun.
that's sort of like in the process of being edited. So I've
Okay.
got that in the background. And I'm also working on another young adult fantasy that I can't really talk too much about at the moment because it's not really officially announced.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that is coming, I think, at some point, like next year or the year after. But yeah, that's fun. And that's more like my original kind of young adult fantasies, and it's sort of
Okay.
more based on Chinese mythology and mixture of Chinese and Western mythology. And yeah, a lot of fun as well. And obviously like
Nice.
heavily romantic, just like all of my other work has been so far. But yeah, so I've got quite a lot happening at the moment, juggling a few different deadlines at once, which seems to be the way things go all the time. But yeah, getting there.
Yeah, that's to keep you busy between practicing veterinary and book deadlines. I can't imagine. So
It's very, very busy here.
I love it. Well, I look forward to the next book, and I'll put your website in the show notes. But is like social media, author newsletter, what's the best way for readers to keep in touch?
Yes, I'm active on social media. My handle is Keshe Writes, so KESHEWRITES, and I'm there on Instagram, probably mostly, but I'm also on TikTok and Threads. And yeah, my author website is www.keshechow.com, and I do have a newsletter as
Oh,
well that people could sign up to,
cool.
which I sort of send out, not sort of a regular newsletter, sender outer. I sort of send it out when I have something to announce or say. So, but I
Nice.
have recently started putting in updates about Wasabi. So I feel like people
Oh.
like to hear about what Wasabi has been up to, which is, not very much because she really doesn't do very much. she just likes on laps and beds and chairs and being like very lazy. But I think her sort of like her job in life is to be cute. So yeah, but I've put in some updates about her too and some
Oh,
pictures. So
cool. Oh, cool.
yeah,
I'll have to check that out because yeah, she looks like such a cool cat. So,
she
well,
is
thank you
very
so
cute.
much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank, thank you for having me. It's been fun to chat, and I'll have to hear more about your dog, Boomer, your black lab.
Yeah, we have a dog, a horse, and a cat. So we kind of have
Oh,
all of them
amazing.
covered. Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure. Yeah, that's sort of like such a menagerie. That's nice.
yeah, it's like one of each right now. So it's good.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And everyone, Strange Familiars, if you love romantasy and animals and just a fun storyline and great characters, this is the book for you. And until next time, keep your tails wagging and pages turning. Thanks for joining me today. Sit, Stay, Read is a part of the Authors on the Air Global Network. If you enjoyed today's author interview, be sure to leave a review and share the episode with a fellow animal-loving reader. If you're curious about the world of working dogs and wilderness adventures, please check out my books at KathleenDonnelly.com. Until next time, curl up with your best furry friend and sit, stay, read.